This one I'm glad to write. Here's the script. Underscore a pound of ground chuck cost about 18.9 cents in 1974, and a boy was expected to know how to brown it in a cast iron skillet by the time he was 9 years old. Not because his mother was too busy, because it was understood, in that house and in nearly every house on that street, that a child was not a guest in the home. A child was a member of the household, and a household ran on the work of everyone in it. Your grandmother did not see it as a kindness to let a child sit while she worked. She saw it as a failure to prepare him for a world that would not wait on him. There was a time when a 7-year-old in rural Ohio knew how to wring out a mop, set a table, and carry kindling without being asked twice. There was a time when a 10-year-old in the Carolinas could be sent to the store with a list and exact change and trusted to come back with all of it. None of this was remarkable then. It was simply what children did. It was the water they swam in. And somewhere in the last 40 years, quietly, without anyone deciding it out loud, we stopped asking. This is a record of 25 things that were expected of children in the 1970s. Ordinary, daily things that we have simply stopped asking of them. Not punishments, expectations, the small duties that told a child every single day that they were needed. This channel exists for one reason: to remember how American families lived, raised their children, kept their homes, and held one another together before so much of it slipped away. If something in these stories feels familiar to you, or feels like something you wish you had been given, take a moment to subscribe. It costs nothing. It only tells this channel that someone out there still believes these things are worth setting down before the last people who remember them are gone. Number 25. A child was expected to answer the telephone properly. When that heavy receiver was lifted off the wall in a kitchen in Pittsburgh, a child did not mumble. A child said the family name, or said hello, and asked who was calling, and then walked the phone or the message to whoever it was for. It seems like nothing. It was not nothing. A child learned that a stranger's voice deserved courtesy, that a household had a name worth saying with care, and that being the one who answered meant being responsible for what happened next. The child was the front door of the family to the outside world. That was a role, a small one, but a real one. Number 24. A child was expected to make the bed every morning, and not a perfect bed, but a made one. Corners tucked, spread pulled flat, pillows squared. A farm wife in Nebraska did not inspect it because she was harsh. She inspected it because she was teaching something that has no name anymore. That you finish what you start before you walk out the door. That the first thing you do in a day, you do completely. A made bed was the first small order imposed on a day that would otherwise be chaos. And a child who made his bed at 7 made 1,000 other small orders later in life without ever knowing where the habit came from. Number 23. A child was expected to clear his own plate from the family table and scrape it and stack it in the sink. Every supper, not the mother's job, the child's, in a working family in Missouri with 4 children and 1 tired woman at the head of it. The table was cleared in under 2 minutes because 8 hands knew their job and did it without being told. The plate you ate from was your responsibility once you were done with it. A child learned that the meal did not end when his hunger ended. It ended when the table was clean. There is a whole way of seeing the world buried in that one small chore. Number 22. A child was expected to address grown adults as sir and ma'am, or as Mr. and Mrs., and never by a first name. A 9-year-old in rural Alabama who called a neighbor by her first name would be corrected before the sentence finished. This was not about fear. It was about a child, understanding that he was a child, that adults occupied a different place in the order of things, and that respect was not a feeling you waited to arrive, but a form you practiced until the feeling followed. The word came first. The respect was built on the back of the word. Number 21. A child was expected to do homework at the kitchen table, in plain sight, with no help and no fuss. The mother peeled potatoes while the boy worked his sums an arm's length away. She did not do it for him. She did not hover. She was simply there, and her being there said the work mattered without a word being spoken. A child learned to struggle through a hard thing alone while a loved one sat near. That is a particular kind of strength, and it is grown in a particular kind of kitchen, and that kitchen is mostly gone now. Number 20. A child was expected to go outside after school and not come back until called, not to be entertained, not to be supervised, just to be out, in the yard, down the street, in the woods, behind the houses, with the other children, until a mother's voice or a porch light called him in for supper. A boy in West Virginia learned to settle his own arguments, mend his own scrapes, find his own way home before dark. The whole neighborhood was the classroom, and the other children were the teachers, and not one adult wrote a single lesson plan. Number 19. A child was expected to sit through supper at the family table until everyone was finished, and to ask to be excused before leaving it. There was no screen. There was no leaving early. A child sat and listened to grown talk he half understood, and learned the rhythm of a conversation, the patience of waiting his turn, the simple discipline of staying in a chair when his body wanted to run. The family table was where a child learned to belong to a group, and not just to himself. An hour a night, every night, for 18 years, you cannot buy what that builds. Number 18. A child was expected to take care of younger brothers and sisters. A 10-year-old girl in the Ozarks watched the little ones while her mother hung wash or worked a shift. And she did it without thinking it strange because the older minded the younger, and always had she learned to be responsible for another human being's safety before she was old enough to fully understand what she was carrying. And the younger ones learned that protection did not only come from adults, it came from anyone in the family who was bigger than you. That is how a family knit itself together, top to bottom, oldest to youngest, every rung carrying the one below. Number 17. A child was expected to do chores without payment. There was no allowance tied to taking out the trash, no dollar for a made bed. The work was simply the rent a child paid for living in the house, and it was understood that you did not get paid to belong to your own family. A boy in Wisconsin who asked to be paid for carrying firewood would have been looked at with genuine confusion. You carried the wood because the family needed wood carried, and you were part of the family. The lesson sank deep. Some things you do for money. Some things you do because you belong to people. A child who learned that line early never lost it. Number 16. A child was expected to write thank you notes by hand. After Christmas, after a birthday, a child sat at the table with paper and a pen and labored over a few lines to a grandmother 3 states away. It was slow. It was sometimes painful. The handwriting was poor, and the words were simple. But a grandmother in Tennessee kept those notes in a drawer for 30 years. And the child learned that gratitude was something you sat down and worked at, not a feeling you had and forgot by supper. The food industry has no interest in any of this, and neither does anyone selling anything to a modern parent. There is no product in a child who can entertain himself in a backyard. There is nothing to sell to a family that eats beans on Thursday and clears its own table. The whole machinery of modern advice points the other way, toward more, toward purchased, toward the idea that a good childhood is a full one, full of lessons and leagues and screens and scheduled enrichment. But your grandmother knew something that machinery will never admit. A child does not need to be filled. A child needs to be needed. And the cheapest, oldest, most forgotten way to make a child feel needed is to hand him a chore and trust him to do it. That trust costs nothing. It is the one thing the modern home, with all its abundance, somehow cannot seem to afford. Number 15. A child was expected to know how to be bored and to do something about it himself. When a child in Missouri said there was nothing to do, no adult solved it for him. He was sent outside, or handed a task, or simply left to figure it out. And in the figuring, he discovered what he actually liked: a book, a creek, a way to whittle, a way to draw. Boredom was the empty field where a child grew his own interests. We have paved that field over entirely. There is no boredom left in childhood, and so there is precious little of what used to grow there. Number 14. A child was expected to mind his manners at another family's house and to come home and report none of their business. A girl who went to a friend's home for supper, ate what was served, said thank you, and did not carry tales back about what she saw there. A child learned discretion. He learned that what happened in another family's kitchen stayed there. There was a whole code of dignity in this, a respect for the privacy of other households that has nearly vanished in an age where everything a child sees gets shared before bedtime. Number 13. A child was expected to do real work alongside a parent, not pretend work. A father in the Carolinas changing the oil did not hand his son a plastic toy wrench. He handed him the real one and showed him where it went. A mother canning tomatoes did not give her daughter a play kitchen. She gave her a real jar and a real ladle and a real burn risk and stood close. A child learned that the things adults did were learnable, that competence was passed hand to hand, that the world of grown work was not a locked room, but a door you were slowly walked through. If any of this is stirring something in you, take a moment in the comments and say where you grew up and which of these your own family asked of you. This channel reads every one of them. There is something quiet and steadying about seeing how many houses, in how many states, ran on these same small expectations. The stories that get written down are the ones that survive. So write yours down. Number 12. A child was expected to be quiet when adults needed quiet. When a father worked a night shift and slept through the morning, the children moved through the house like small ghosts, and they learned it without being told twice. A child learned that the household had needs larger than his own moods, that there were times to be still, that the comfort of another person could matter more than the noise he wanted to make. This is among the first lessons a self-centered creature ever receives, and a child receives it best, young, in a quiet house, for the sake of a tired parent he loves. Number 11. A child was expected to walk or ride a bicycle to where he needed to go. School, the store, a friend's house, the ball field. No parent drove a child 3 blocks. A boy in Pittsburgh knew his neighborhood the way he knew his own hands because he crossed it on foot 100 times a week. He learned distance and direction and the names of the dogs on every street. His body grew strong from the plain daily fact of moving it. We have taken the walking out of childhood, and with it something harder to name. The slow knowledge of a place that only comes from crossing it yourself. Number 10. A child was expected to eat what was put in front of him, not what he chose, not a separate meal cooked to his liking. What the family ate, the child ate, and a working mother in West Virginia who had stretched 1 chicken across a family of 6 had no patience for a child who pushed it away. A child learned that food was not entertainment and not a preference to be indulged, but a gift that had cost someone money and effort and time. He learned to be grateful for plain food, and a person who learned to be grateful for plain food at 7 was a person who never went through life starving in the middle of plenty. Number 9. A child was expected to keep his word. If a boy in Nebraska said he would be home by dark, he was home by dark. And if he said he would feed the neighbor's animals, the animals got fed. A child learned that his word was a thing with weight, that to say you would do something and then not do it was a small shame that followed you. The whole of a person's trustworthiness is built out of 10,000 kept small promises in childhood. We have stopped holding children to their word, and then we wonder, years later, where the trustworthy adults went. Number 8. A child was expected to greet guests and to look them in the eye. When company came to a home in Alabama, the children stood, said hello, shook a hand, or accepted a pat on the head and did not slink off to hide. A child learned to face other people, to carry himself in front of strangers, to be a small representative of his family's warmth. There is a whole life skill folded into this, the plain ability to look another human being in the eye and say hello. And it is grown in a child who was made to do it, gently, again and again, until it stopped being hard. These were never just chores and rules. Strip away the dishes and the made beds and the thank you notes, and what is left underneath is a single message repeated to a child every day in 100 small ways. You are part of this. We need you. What you do matters to people other than yourself. That was the real lesson, and the chores were only the alphabet it was written in. When we stopped asking these things, we did not simply get tidier childhoods or freer children. We took away the daily proof a child once had that he belonged to something that needed him, and a child who is never needed grows into a person who suspects, somewhere deep down, that he could vanish and nothing would change. We gave our children everything except the thing they needed most, which was to be counted on. Number 7. A child was expected to sit with the olds when a grandmother grew slow and stayed in the back bedroom. The children were sent in to sit with her, to listen to the same stories, to be patient with the repetition. A girl in the Ozarks learned that the old were not set aside, but kept close, woven into the daily life of the house, and that her own small presence was a comfort to someone near the end. She learned that a person's worth did not end when their usefulness did. That lesson learned at a grandmother's bedside is one our children rarely get the chance to learn at all anymore. Number 6. A child was expected to handle money carefully and account for it. Sent to the store with a $5 bill, a boy in Missouri came home with the goods and the change and could tell you the price of each thing. A child learned that money was finite, that it was earned with hard hours, that you did not spend what you did not have. He learned the weight of $1 by being trusted to carry a few of them. We have made money abstract for children, invisible, a tap on a screen, and in doing so, we have taken away the early, hard education in scarcity that once made careful adults. Number 5. A child was expected to fix and mend rather than throw away. A torn shirt went to the mending basket, not the trash. A bicycle with a flat got patched, not replaced. A girl in Wisconsin watched her mother turn a frayed collar and learned that a thing was not finished just because it was broken. A child learned that the world was repairable. That effort could restore what time had worn, that you did not discard a thing the moment it stopped being perfect. There is a deep steadiness in a person who believes things can be mended. We have raised a generation taught the opposite by every shelf in every store. Number 4. A child was expected to share a room, a bed, a bathroom, a coat handed down from an older sibling. Privacy was not a right of childhood. It was a luxury that most families could not afford, and the children did not know to miss it. 3 brothers in a West Virginia coal town shared one bed and one another's warmth, and the plain daily lesson that you make room for the people you love. A child learned to live close to others, to give way, to share without ceremony. The forced closeness of a crowded house built something that the private bedrooms of today, for all their comfort, cannot. Number 3. A child was expected to work through being tired, sick, or unwilling within reason. If the cow needed milking, a farm child in Nebraska milked it with a head cold. If the dishes were his, they got done whether he felt like it or not. A child learned that the world did not pause for his moods, that duty did not wait for the mood to be right, and that there was a quiet pride on the far side of doing a thing you did not feel like doing. This is perhaps the single hardest lesson to give a child today, and it was once given so routinely that no one even named it. They just called it growing up. Number 2. A child was expected to contribute to the family's survival, not just its tidiness. In hard years, a child's work was not symbolic. A boy in the Depression's long shadow who gathered coal that fell along the tracks was warming his family. A girl who tended the garden was feeding it. The work was real, the stakes were real, and the child knew it. To be needed for the family's actual survival is the deepest form of belonging a human being can know. And our children, blessed with abundance, will likely never feel it. We protected them from hardship, and in doing so, we protected them from the thing that hardship gave: the unshakable knowledge that you mattered to the people you loved. And, number 1, a child was expected to become someone the family could be proud of, and to carry the family's name into the world with care. Above every chore and rule sat this single expectation, mostly unspoken, felt more than said. You were not raising yourself for yourself alone. You were a link in a chain that ran back through grandparents you barely knew, and forward to children not yet born, and how you lived reflected on all of them. A child in any of these towns, in any of these states, carried that quiet weight, and the weight did not crush him. It steadied him. It told him he was part of something that began before him and would go on after him, and that his small life had a place in a long story. That is the thing we stopped asking. Not the dishes, not the made beds. We stopped asking children to belong to something larger than themselves. We handed them full bellies and private rooms and endless entertainment. And we kept from them the one ancient gift that every generation before had given as a matter of course: the gift of being needed, of being counted on, of mattering to the survival and the dignity of the people whose name they carried. What made those families strong was never the abundance, because there was none. It was that everyone in the house was holding up some corner of it. And what unsteadies so many now is not that we have too little, it is that we have arranged our lives so that no one has to hold up anything at all. So here is one small thing to do this week. Find a child in your life, your own, a grandchild, a niece, the boy next door, and give him one real job, not a chore for a chart. A real thing the household actually needs done, and then trust him to do it, and thank him when it is done as you would thank a grown man. Watch what happens in his face when he understands that he was needed and that he came through. That look is the thing we have been talking about this whole time. It costs nothing, and it is the oldest medicine there is. If you found something worth keeping here, subscribe so the next one of these finds its way to you. Share it with someone who would understand it, a sister raising children of her own, a parent who feels something is missing and cannot name it, the friend from church who still does things the old way, and in the comments, leave the one job your own mother or father gave you as a child that you have never forgotten. The chore, the duty, the small trust that made you feel, for the first time, like you were truly part of your family. That is how these things survive, one memory at a time. That is what we stopped asking. That is what it cost us. And that, in 100 small kitchens, is what we could still begin to ask again.